आ गया ना, स्टार्ट कर दिया, अनम्यूट।
हाँ, हम शुरू कर रहे हैं। जी, हम शुरू कर रहे हैं। प्रोफेसर साहब, आप मुझे सुन पा रहे हैं?
जी जी डॉक्टर साहब।
हाँ, थैंक यू। तो सभी प्रतिभागियों को नमस्कार। और पीजीटीएवी और रामानुजन कॉलेज द्वारा
स्क्रीन शेयर कैसे करूँगा?
इस संकाय विकास के कार्यक्रम में आपका पुनः स्वागत है।
शेयर।
साथियों, आज विषय विशेषज्ञ के तौर पर हमारे साथ प्रोफेसर देवेश विजय इस सत्र में होंगे और उनका टॉपिक होगा कल्चर एंड सोसाइटी, ए ग्राउंड रिपोर्ट ऑन देयर इंटरैक्शंस। तो प्रोफेसर देवेश विजय से मेरा अनुरोध होगा कि क्योंकि हमारे प्रतिभागी देश के विभिन्न भागों से और शिक्षा और शिक्षण के विभिन्न माध्यमों से आते हैं, तो उनकी सुविधा के लिए आप यथासंभव द्विभाषी हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों में बोलने का प्रयास कीजिएगा। तो मैं प्रोफेसर देवेश विजय की एक ब्रीफली उनके बारे में बताता हूँ।
अब ये भी जा रहा है उनको?
पूछ लो ना एक बार।
30 years University of Delhi.
Yeah.
Professor Devesh Vijay has a rare ability to books and articles in the leading journals of 5 social science disciplines: economics, sociology, political science. The major themes on which he has worked and published include tracking economic and social and cultural change in working class communities. Second, analyzing roots of underdevelopment. Third, anthropology of welfare and political perceptions in changing villages. Fourth, oral histories of Indian national movement. 5, discourse analysis of left discourses in Indian politics. Then comparative cultural histories with special reference to mentalities. Then curriculum reform and multimedia aids their development for students of history. And evolving an integrated course on human sciences for professional streams. He has been a recipient of many prestigious fellowships like ICSSR, Ratan Tata Fellow, and Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, Delhi. His books, some of his prominent books include Writing Politics, Left Discourse on Contemporary India in 2004, then Dalits and Democracy, Transitions in 2 North Indian Communities, 2016. Then there is another book on Staggered Development, Close-ups from Delhi's Margins in 2019. And he has been one of the pioneers of writing on European history in Hindi. उनकी कई पुस्तकें हमारे विद्यार्थी पढ़ते हैं, दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी के और बाकी यूनिवर्सिटीज के भी। आधुनिक यूरोप का इतिहास, आयाम व दिशाएं, 2013। तो इन किताबों के बगैर मैं इस विषय को पढ़ाता हूँ, तो इन किताबों के बगैर हमारे हिंदी भाग के विद्यार्थी काम नहीं चला सकते, ये मैं आपको कह सकता हूँ। यूरोपीय संस्कृति And he has a very long list of research articles in reputed international and national journals. Besides chapters, he has contributed in books in both English and Hindi and conference proceedings. He has been a pioneer in developing multimedia education material also. And that was long came, such popular writings also in various newspapers and magazines. As a responsible and sensitive academic, Professor Devesh Vijay has done a lot of grassroots in marginalized communities in slums. On a personal level, I know Professor Devesh as a very affable customer for his connections. Without taking much of your valuable time, I request Professor Devesh to start his session. Over to you, sir. I again request sir to be bilingual, sir, in your presentation and discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dost. I hope I am audible to all participants.
Sure, sir. Bilkul, sir.
I said Dost on purpose, Chandrapal, because not only is it a very endearing term, but it is related to our topic of discussion today, language being a very important aspect of culture. Before I come to the topic, I must also thank the organizers, principals of PGDAV College, Ramanujan College, and the entire team at especially PGDAV College for inviting me to this theme, to this talk over which I have actually thought for a long time. In fact, in my middle teens, there is some disturbance. Am I audible?
You're audible, sir. You're audible.
Okay. So as I was saying that I have had a opportunity to reflect for a long time on this theme ever since I started reading historians like Arnold Toynbee, Will Durant, and even Nehru in my teens. Unfortunately, the term mentalities, which I see as the core of culture, has not been used by many disciplines except the annals historians like Mark Bloch, who reflected on this in almost 100 years ago, but the theme was not taken up subsequently. I shall dwell on the possible reasons for this neglect, but before that I must also confess that the issue is not only highly theoretical but also abstract. So I urge your indulgence to bear with it. I'll try to offer as many examples as possible to explain the abstract ideas on which I would dwell over the talk. But it's my apology if I try to be bilingual throughout. It will hamper the speed, and since I want to cover a lot of ground, I'll stick to English for the beginning and come to a Hindi recapitulation at the end. So I'll divide it that way, and of course any questions that you have, I shall be very happy to answer in Hindi as well. Now, unfortunately, the relationship between culture and society has been spoken of in very abstract ways at times, and I had the opportunity to do field work right since 1988. I have been revisiting two communities in particular, one slum called Aradhak Nagar and one village called Dhantala, which is near Meerut. And this through this field work, I've always been reflecting on the relation between culture and society and changes that are coming at both levels, which I shall try to add at the end of my talk, how I try to interpret culture through a multi-method approach through my fieldwork. But to begin with, let us look at the broad questions that are related to this very theoretical issue, a very abstract issue of relations between culture and society. I'll first list the possible questions and then select some of these on which I shall dwell in today's talk. To begin with, we need to grasp what are the various dimensions of culture, how do they relate in the long term and short term with each other, what role does culture play in social change in comparison to polity, economy and social structure, and in what ways currently culture is changing through processes of globalization and modernization, etc. Coming to cultural analysis in particular, again there are very important questions to dwell upon. What is a cultural community? How can we map cultural differences? And what are the challenges of cultural change today, and what very significant part of society like the teaching community can do to make cultural change more meaningful and harmonious. These are broad questions, I think, which relate to the theme. Obviously we won't be able to go into all of these themes. I have picked up 7 issues in particular. I shall start by talking about the way in which these key concepts, that is culture, society and interrelations, are used by different social science streams. Then I shall explain the particular usage which I feel is theoretically significant for our concern, our topic today. Especially I shall talk about mentalities and the way we can interpret mentalities to understand societies better. And lastly, I shall talk about some significant aspects of Indian culture and the way it is changing under the impact of modernization and globalization. Especially from my fieldwork experience, I shall give some examples, and as I said, I also reflect upon the interventions that are emerging with new technologies, online learning, etc., before teachers and researchers today. Now, before I start with the first issue of I hope the screen is visible to the participants.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, so these are some of the readings on this complex theme. There are introductory works and there are advanced readings. I shall give them as a link later on. But apart from books and articles, there are some very useful web lectures and talks and interviews available today with very celebrated thinkers. I have given some links. Then I shall also use this opportunity to promote some of my own writings, although Dr. Chandrapal has already mentioned some. Especially I would like on this present theme, I would request participants to have a look at my book Sanskritik Itihas Ek Tulnatmak Sarvekshan, where I have defined lots of terms and related Indian, Chinese and European cultures and their respective dynamisms in light of other social dimensions. I must also make transparent my own ideological biases and theoretical preferences. Uh, as you may have guessed, I'm more of a liberal in the sense that I value liberty as much as equality, but unlike the left, I don't think equality of outcomes is a very desirable aim for political activists, rather equality of opportunity as in modern welfare states. My favorite thinkers have been Mark Bloch, Brodel, Giddens, amongst Indians N.K. Bose, Andre Bethe. Uh, uh, Here I would also caution participants about very heavy reading lists, which sometimes act as barriers to clear illuminating works that we can find on our own. This is just a small personal feeling about scholarly writing, especially in present times, in the wake of postmodernism and other theories. Now, coming to the main course after these starters, what are the various usages of the terms culture, society, and interrelations, and which ones are we going to pick up for our theoretical discussion? I hope I am clear. Let me just check once again. Am I audible, and is my English plain enough? I hope I am not using too much jargon. Is it okay?
Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the term society, there are 4 different usages of this term. I'll just give examples and it will be self-evident. Ajay is not keeping good society these days. No. Here we are referring to a face-to-face group by the term society. A group housing society. So here we are talking about a formal association. Bengali society or Indian society. Now we are talking about a very large group with a territorial boundary and some kind of identity based on its cultural markers. But the most significant usage for theorizing on culture and society is where we refer by society a generic term where it involves connections between multiple groups and their individual and collective needs being served by certain societal dimensions like polity, economy, social structure and culture. These are 4 main dimensions of society when we use it in this theoretically relevant generic term. Now let's come to culture and its various usages. The term culture is again used in very divergent ways. On one extreme, when we say there is a cultural evening after the conference, here we are talking about culture as fine arts, dance, music, poetry, etc. This is a very specific usage of the term. Another narrow usage but very significant one is culture as noble values, or when we say Sanskriti as sanskar, the noble values enshrined in a group's literature, philosophy, etc. As I said, this is extremely important in any pedagogy, but it doesn't tell us about the wider behavior patterns and motivations of people in a community. So this is again, theoretically speaking, a narrow usage. Coming to the broader, before the broader term, let me also refer to the leftist usage of the term culture. For long, left Marxist scholars especially avoided using the term culture and rather used hegemony or ideology, etc., because of the importance they give to class contradictions and oppression and resistance in society. Lately, of course, with Frankfurt School, critical theory, etc., and especially coming of postmodernism, culture is being used a lot, and in fact, cultural studies developed within leftist Marxist analysis. But the central concern of left cultural studies has been to highlight, as for example, even in subaltern studies, highlight elements of hegemony and resistance within communities rather than mapping out variations in beliefs, values, etc. across regions. The leftists and recent scholarship have also used terms like popular culture versus elite culture, mass culture versus mainstream culture, and so on. I will not go into elaborating these terms, but if there are any questions around them, I'd be extremely happy to answer. Among broader notions of culture, there is a Taylorian. Taylor was a famous anthropologist. He used the term culture as social whole, which includes everything, people's pottery, from poetry to poetry, everything. Now this is again, to my mind, a superfluous usage because it is almost a synonym of the term society. A more precise usage of the term culture in anthropology has been as norms, values, traditions, and customs. This kind of definition again has a problem because it is giving examples of what culture involves. It is not defining the feature which connects them. For that, I have found the better definition of culture in this as one aspect of society. As widely shared and distinctive behavior and thought patterns of a group. Now, these again can be classified into two broad realms. There is a material culture and there is an intangible culture of thought patterns which actually guides us from within our consciousness. Material culture examples would be, everyday life, how we sleep, how we eat, how we, these things also vary across communities. For example, some people sit cross-legged while eating, some people have dining tables and so. So these, everyday life variations is one aspect of culture which reflects in behavior patterns and, our greetings, even the way we grieve at a death or etc. vary a lot. In some cultures there is very loud grieving, in others even shedding tears is considered embarrassing and so on. So I hope my point is clear. There are behavioral patterns which immediately strike us when we move across regions, and these are material aspects of culture. Another tangible aspect of culture is its symbol systems, which like religion, like education system, like folklore, which shape mentalities or thought patterns. And as I said, the intangible aspect, the most crucial aspect which is difficult to map is these mentalities or thought patterns illustrated by beliefs, values, loyalties, self-perceptions or identities, etc. These are all inside our head. They are the most crucial dimension of culture, which is intangible. Now, regarding this intangible mentalities dimension, one point needs to be made. Emotions and feelings are patterned differently in different cultures. In some as I mentioned, in some cultures even shedding tear in public is found embarrassing, or loud wailing in another culture may be found in fact deemed necessary. in a death ritual, etc. So these emotions and feelings are also trained very differently in different communities according to their cultures. Similarly, lastly, psychological traits like aggressiveness, cheerfulness, etc., are also can show variations across groups, which we all actually subconsciously understand, even while moving within India from say Punjab to say Bhadralok society in Bengal. Even these expressions are very starkly different. So these are 6 broad dimensions of mentalities which we need to attend to. Now each of these dimensions also have 3 different levels. The or let's say first 2 levels, conscious and subconscious. And within the conscious level, there are very important differences between overt thinking and covert thinking, or private thought patterns which we don't manifest to others. Now, for example, say when we are talking, say in a staff council meeting, we make appeal to students' interest or the cause of scholarship, etc. These are public ideals which we would invoke in our public talk. But covert thinking, according at the level which we make our plans, our strategies regarding relationships, etc. This is a very important dimension of conscious thinking which needs to be separately studied, and all these mentalities that I mentioned, beliefs, values, tastes, traits, emotions and loyalties, 6 dimensions, need to be studied at these 3 levels for a comprehensive understanding of mentalities and how different cultural communities have different patterns along these respective dimensions. Now, another very important precaution about culture and its mapping is that cultures are not static. This is not a very difficult point to appreciate. Of course, cultures all the time change, but cultures, since they the authors of culture or champions of culture often invoke tradition as if things have carried on for ages in the group. This needs some qualification. Culture does have deep past roots. Mentalities don't emerge suddenly in a society, but cultures are nevertheless never static. They keep changing also. And even as a historian called Hobsbawm highlighted, even tradition is often invented in very recent past, but shown as having come from the distant past of a society. Secondly, culture is never uniform. Each individual is unique and creative, and culture is only a loose web. Culture doesn't create individuals like a computer creates uniform floppies. Each individual is unique. Secondly, cultures have subgroups who evaluate their common systems, symbols, etc., slightly differently from each other. These subcultures can be based on religious groups within a society who belong to the same culture, say as in India, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. These are subcultures within a broader Indian culture. Similarly, Marxists, for example, as I said, would look upon elites and subalterns or ruling class and the oppressed as different, having different consciousness or interpretations of the same cultural texts, symbols, etc. Obviously, caste is a very good example, would be viewed differently in upper caste and Dalits and so on. So this shows that each culture has several subcultures and each individual is unique, yet there are some shared perspectives and understandings which unite them at a deeper level. But how do we distinguish a culture and a subculture? This is also an important point to understand. The subcultures will have, as I said, a divergent evaluation of a commonly understood symbol in a culture. As I said, say Gita or Manusmriti may be viewed differently across castes. They will be evaluated differently, but they all understand broadly what the text means, and they also understand each other's interpretations to some extent. On the other hand, when intelligibility itself is blocked, there we can say the cultural boundary is found. For example, an Eskimo will not be able to even understand what say a European understands from, say, the cross. This is an example. This is a sharp example of cultural boundary where the interpretive frames are also different. Understanding is impossible. Let me give an example of, say, closer home. Japanese rarely talk unless introduced, and they don't laugh aloud. Even it's complained that they don't smile too much. Now, this kind of reticence may be misunderstood in Haryana as indifference or cold behavior. So this is how cultures are marked out, because their understandings are different. On the other hand, subcultures do understand each other's readings, but they evaluate cultural texts and patterns slightly differently. This is the distinction between understanding cultural boundaries and subcultural boundaries which lie within the same culture. Another very important qualification to make regarding mentalities is that they should not be seen as consistent sets of ideas and beliefs. In fact, it is quite normal to have contradictions within cultural communities regarding values, etc. For example, a person also does puja in the morning and may watch a TV soap in the afternoon, or go for a late night party. All these activities signify different value patterns, but within a culture they have a certain range. For example, sati falls within a possible practice in Indian culture, but in Islam sati is not possible. In Europe it is not conceivable. Patriarchy exists in all these cultural spheres, but they have some boundary, some limitations of range. That is what distinguishes them as different cultural spheres. So as I said, contradictions and inconsistency is not an exception in cultures, but they lie within a range or a culture or a ranking pattern. same cultures are formed by same set of values. For example, valor will be glorified in every community, intelligence will be glorified, artistic talent will be glorified, but different communities rank them differently. For example, in the Pathans, among Pathans, showing your back in the battle is social death. Not so maybe in Lucknowi Tehzeeb or say in Bengali Bhadralok culture, where artistic talent may be more valued, etiquette may be more valued. So this is to show that cultures rank same sets of values, beliefs, etc. differently and stress them differently. As I said, Pathans versus say Bhadralok. This. I hope this example will make the point clear, and thereby they create different patterns. But like in a kaleidoscope, the same elements with a slight tilt can offer a very different pattern. Similarly, cultures arrange same sets of values, etc., beliefs, etc., in different order, with different stress, and that is what gives them unique identity or pattern. Also, when we study culture, it is important to look at silences and gaps in cultures. For example, when I went to initially to Dhantala, the village where I did my field work, it immediately struck me there is nothing like private bedrooms even for couples. Now of course, this practice has emerged, but when in '88, when I had initially landed in the village, the notion of privacy, bathing in the open, women bathing in their own in their regular dress, open defecation, of course. So these are not found in say Western culture at all. In fact, there are reports that even in early modern industrial Britain, there were slums, but they mention toilets being very dirty, etc., which shows that open defecation was not a practice even in early modern Britain. So another example of absences being very important to note is that England never had a standing army. That helps us a lot in understanding how not only the English Revolution was the first modern revolution and the first Bill of Rights was created in England, but as early as 1381 there was a peasant rebellion. John Ball, his group surrounded the king, and they got a promise regarding abolition of feudal dues. Now this kind of thing is not heard of in, for example, India, where even is there a disconnection?
नहीं सर, आपको आवाज आ रही है?
अच्छा, are you sure? Because here the picture is disappearing at times.
Yes, sir. At times it disappears.
But the voice is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Voice is there, and your
And
picture is also there.
And the screen is there also. The page, the points are visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, with all these qualifications and caveats about mentalities, you may wonder, this is a very fuzzy and messy theme to explore. But as I mentioned, This is maybe a virtue, not a vice, because society itself is not easy to uh, map or predict. So the fuzziness or the messiness of culture should not be seen as a problem necessarily. For this reason, we ignore the study of mentalities would be perhaps not valid. As I said, it affects our behavior, decision making, etc. So obviously, we need to have meticulous mapping of cultural differences across countries and regions for better understandings. Another example of very significant differences in mentalities and behavior patterns I would like to mention is if you go to Japan, if you leave forget something on the beach or even at the airport, there is very little chance that it will not be traced back. The trust levels are very strong. In some Western countries, there is hardly any check on your shopping. You just pay on your own and move out. People leave even a baby in a pram on the road as they enter a mall, etc. The crime rate is very low. So these are very important assets of cultures and communities. And not only it is important to appreciate them, but also see how what lies at their root, and thereby this is not to say that everything is good in the West or in rapid modernizers like Japan, etc. Loneliness, high suicide rate, these are broken families, large number of children who are growing up in single parent families, very high divorce rate. They are a huge problem. I'm not saying, but all these are aspects of culture. Pluses and minuses are there everywhere. There's no need to clarify any one culture or our own culture, but to learn from the positives in each. Now I come to the third major term in our title, that is interrelation. What does interrelations between society and culture mean in theoretical terms? Interrelations may stand for autonomous existence, just correlation without mutual influences, or on the other extreme there could be a one-way causal determination of one aspect by the other. This can be one form of interrelation, or there is a feedback loop. There are cause and effect relations both ways. Now, before we understand major perspectives on interrelations between society and culture from different scholars, let us also remember what are important dimensions of society apart from culture. Often in our textbooks we talk about four main dimensions: economy, polity, social structure, and culture. But I would like to suggest that actually each of these four need to be associated with a twin. For example, before we study economy, we need to look at the ecology and demography of a community. Similarly, along with social structure of, that is, different classes, age groups, gender relations, etc. These are the large groupings into which people can be divided on the basis of their differential access to power and resources. Apart from these groups, we need to look at the micro groupings also of not only family but neighborhoods, friendships, relationships between colleagues, etc. So these are another facet of social structure. Similarly, polity should be studied along with uh, administration as well as policy making and local politics and struggles. And lastly, as I've already mentioned, culture itself is a complex of four major dimensions: everyday life and behavior patterns, symbol systems or cultural institutions of religion, education system, etc., and mentalities or ideals, values, and so on, which I have just listed uh, before. Now, in all of these dimensions, the pace of change is often different. For example, culture changes very slowly, but once it changes, its impact is very subtle yet deep. Politics is more dramatic in terms of shifts and contests, and economy is somewhere in between. So we need to study relationships, keeping in mind the differential pace of change at these various levels, and also broadly avoid the notion of one-way causality or determinism of one by another. On the whole, apart from avoiding the notion of any one-way causality, looking for multi-causal chains in understanding social shifts and transitions. We also need to remember that the cultural dimension is always important to understand society, apart from its impact on other dimensions like politics and economy. In order to just appreciate or understand what's happening in a society, its values and beliefs patterns need a lot of attention. That is why, and this is in fact the constant theme in anthropology, and what they call the interpretive method, which Max Weber especially emphasized in understanding any major change. It's important. In fact, here I might refer to the difference between Karl Marx and Max Weber, in especially their explanations of the rise of capitalism. Max Weber showed how religion had a lot to do with the rise of capitalism, which is a kind of counterintuitive. People will generally not expect that, but Karl Marx in fact called religion as the opium of the masses. But Max Weber showed that the rise of capitalism was much faster in northern Germany, where Protestantism was widespread. Similarly, in France, there were certain groups, the Calvinists, etc., who were much ahead in capitalist enterprises than Catholics. So he explained how the work ethic promoted by Protestantism. Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. Sorry.
You are audible, sir.
Okay, so I'll carry on. And I hope I'm also intelligible. It's a very dense, it's a very abstract theme, but I hope it will be useful to participants in not only teaching but also in daily life, as I said. Now, there's another question about related to interrelations, which is apart from culture influencing other aspects of society, how is culture itself shaped? Now, as I said, cultural patterns emerge in a certain ecological background, a historical background, and of course they are directly shaped by cultural institutions of religion, education, even political movements. Certain charismatic individuals have a lot of influence in changing mentality patterns sometimes. Gandhi is a good example of that. Even major prophets can all be given as illustrations, where some individuals themselves had important role in changing mentality patterns around them. Now, but as I said, culture is much slower in changing than in the hurly-burly of politics, etc. Stories are a very important instrument which cultures use to transmit values and beliefs, etc. And by stories, we include folklore, myths, also today's films, mass media, news channels. They all use narratives, and this reminds me that we have a serious neglect in our pedagogy of biographies, which should be there as an important part of education and growing up. Unfortunately, our libraries have a section on biographies, but in none of the graduation programs we have entry on this. Now, let's very quickly look at how cultures have changed over time. This is a very quick overview. In prehistory, tribes were generally distant from each other and evolved their own distinct cultural patterns in this scenario. With the rise of early proto-states, because all these states, in contrast to modern states, can be defined as proto-states, whether it is Roman or Magadha. Obviously, communication links and state control, etc., made cultural exchanges also more easy. But more than states, it is the rise of mega religions as opposed to the tribal religions, which created civilizational spheres out of earlier distant cultural communities. But the real pace to cultural diffusion and integration was brought with modernity, and here not only the rise of the modern nation state, but radical new ideologies, socialism, democracy, nationalism, and what I call overdue feminism, because patriarchy has been one of the oldest institutions, but unlike early proto-socialist thought, which we see, for example, in Solon's rebellion in Greece, or say the 1381 rebellion in England, demanding erasure of feudalism, and so many peasant of Jacqueries in France. There are proto-socialist ideas. Even the Taiping rebellion or the Satnami movement in India. Adaptive change has been a high mark of our Indian transition to modernity. This doesn't mean that there are some dangers as well, but before that I would like to mention some points about Indian culture which are often some claims which are not very well grounded. For example, when we say that we are a very spiritual people, or that we respect elders, now these kinds of claims are not, first of all, unique to India, nor are they very close to the real world, the real relations that we have on the ground. Similarly, there are some claims made about Indian family and religiosity, etc., which are, or the special place that sage fakir is given in our culture. But these are Asian values, not exclusive to India. What is very exclusive to India, apart from being pan-Indian, I would like to leave to you as a question. Just please give a thought. What will you highlight is an institution or cultural mark which is attribute, which is pan-Indian and unique to India? When we say there is unity underlying our diversity, what will be the examples of this pan-Indian unity that you will give? Not, elders respect, our family, etc., which is not unique to India. Pathans are equally proud of, Chinese are very proud of their respect that they give to their elders and so on. So, about the dark side in Indian culture, one is of course untouchability. We see a very major transition in that now. I found the same in my fieldwork. But another point that I would like to mention is a tradition of very weak strategic thinking, almost apathy towards the defense and political order demands. A very stark example of this is the fact that there are only 3 passes through which invaders came from the west. Only 3 passes in the mountain range. Nature has given us almost like a Chinese wall. The Chinese built such a huge wall to defend their civilization, and this happened when Ashoka Mauryan Empire was in India. As early as that in China, they started building that wall. We were given a natural barrier, just 3 passes, and we could not even block them. Not only did we not block them, there was no discussion of this possibility, despite the fact that we had not only successive invasions but very brutal invasions, which led to a lot of violence in North India. Now, this is an example of our one dark side of Indian cultural tradition, very weak strategic thinking. We have Chanakya as one of the few who reflected systematically on the stability of the state. But even, I don't think he mentions, although Alexander had invaded by that time, he does not reflect on this issue. And he's, of course, a rare realist political thinker, one of the few. Of course, there is in Mahabharata, there is but overall it's a very, very weak. And that this attribute continues to this day also. Even a topic like what are the fault lines in Indian polity today, what are major dangers when these fault lines come together, in what kind of multi-front wars we can face. These things we don't teach to students, nor do we often discuss them. So that is one thing which worries me, and I hope as teachers we can make some interventions on this front. Now, as I said, I'll give from my fieldwork some examples of how to interpret mentalities. Mentalities, as I said, are invisible, intangible, and even unmeasurable. But stark differences in thought and belief patterns are very easily gauged. How can we make this methodologically more systematic. For this, anthropologists use the method of thick description. But thick description, they mean very close scrutiny from multiple vantage points of cultural symbols and practices. For example, Clifford Geertz is a very famous anthropologist who has a celebrated essay called the Balinese Cockfight. Now, he interprets or deduces the worldview and ethos, what he calls worldview and ethos, we are calling it beliefs and values, from this cockfight that he saw in Bali Island, and say their notions of social hierarchy, community, competition, and also recreation, etc. He deduces from this cockfight that he describes in very great detail. Now, you can imagine, say anthropologists have come to India, they have similarly deciphered our Holi. There is a famous essay by Meckham Marriott on Holi and how it's a safety valve on suppressed urges in society, and how on one day it inverts, and like say the carnival in Europe, it acts as a safety valve on suppressed tensions. For example, on Holi, even Dalits can play with upper caste, men can use color on their women folk and so on, which is otherwise very seriously objected to on any other day. So these are the ways anthropologists decipher through what they call thick description inner beliefs and value systems, what they call embodied in cultural symbols like Holi or cockfight or say something. So I have some discomfort with this tradition of locating or mapping culture through symbols. My objection is this, that each culture or society has not only many but very diverse symbols. You can't get an idea of actually held beliefs and values by looking at any one symbol, and there is no way, no easy way to even select which symbol to pick on. For example, if I look at Ram Leela, will I be right in deducing that the family values and etc. also inform the behavior patterns today of the public that watches Ram Leela? Obviously not. For that you will have to look at actual behavior, what I call praxis, thought out action, not ritual action, not ceremonies, but thought out behavior and the response that behavior gets in society. So now I'll give an example of how I attended a wedding in a Dalit family in Dhantala and tried to decipher their thought patterns from not looking at ritual action or routine action, but what I'm calling praxis or thought out action. Rituals, for example, the same fairas or the ceremonies that are seen in any Hindu wedding, but if I ask the attendees, most will not even know what the chants or mantras etc. mean, or what the ceremony actually symbolizes, far from actually imbibing the values transmitted by these ceremonies. For that I have to look at the gossip that goes on, the way people get together. For example, at the feast after the wedding, it was very important to note that Now Dalits are also inviting Brahmins and upper caste, and they are coming to the occasion. But they stand in different groups to some extent, although there is some interaction also. So, as I said, untouchability has come down remarkably in the village. Also, I had a very, in fact, interesting. I was part of a discussion which very well illustrates what I mean by deciphering mentalities from praxis. There was, a teacher who was telling some elders, देखिए मैं कल एक प्रैक्टिकल एग्ज़ाम है मेरठ कॉलेज में और मैं उसमें एग्ज़ामिनर बन के जा रहा हूँ, और आपका कोई अगर बंदा हो जिसको मदद करनी हो तो मुझे बता दीजिए. तो once he had left, the group's response was, देखो कितने भले आदमी हैं, अपनी बिरादरी का ध्यान रखते हैं. So here is praxis and a social response to that praxis, which signifies how the administrative rules, the civic norms are much less important than fidelity to your community, to your joint family bonds and caste bonds and so on. Although this is not something very newsy, I'm sure we all know this happens in our culture, but what I'm saying is this is an example of interpreting cultural values and beliefs not from the rituals of the wedding but from the talk and the praxis reported at in these talk. Here I may also mention, what do we do about historical mapping of cultures? You may ask that praxis you may explore by visiting a field, but how do we use the same method for past research? For that also, the same method actually helps. I'll just give an example. It is known that Akbar walked for miles to Ajmer Dargah barefoot in order to get the blessing for a son. Now, this is mentioned by Abul Fazl and with commendation and praise, and also that how there was a large flock going along with Akbar. So we are seeing here praxis, thought out action, and social response or support for that action, from which we can deduce a certain mentality symbolized in that activity. This वो भी एक पहलू है, पर इंटरनेट हाँ तो उसकी एक बहुत बड़ी उपकरण है, और सौभाग्य की बात है कि संस्कृतियाँ ख़त्म नहीं हो रही हैं, एक्सटिंक्ट नहीं हो रही हैं, उनका हाइब्रिडाइजेशन हो रहा है, लोकल मिल रहा है फॉरेन इन्फ्लुएंसेस के साथ, और वो केवल इन्फ्लुएंसेस जो हावी हो रहे हैं वो केवल वेस्ट से नहीं आ रहे हैं, हालांकि ज़्यादातर वेस्ट से आ रहे हैं, लेकिन उसमें जापान का भी योगदान है, हिंदुस्तान का भी योगदान है. और मैंने इस्लाम के ऊपर आज चर्चा अलग से नहीं की है, लेकिन ये भी एक बहुत लंबा विषय है एक विचार के लिए कि भारतीय इस्लाम की अपनी कुछ पहचान है. तो ये मुख्य शिफ्ट्स हैं.